Look, I get the memo, guys. I haven't taken off the ridiculous Batman costume or done away with the dumb Batman voice, so I figured it was time. It's time to grow up and just put aside the silliness for once in my life, right? Wrong! Today is my Batman movies ranked video, and originally I was going to do a tier list. That's what I usually do on this channel, but with 50 movies, that's a very difficult thing to do, so I figured I would go classic ranking with 50 Batman films, including animated movies, a couple of Justice League films that I feel like Batman has a huge role in, and of course, the live-action movies that we know and love. Now, Austin, what are the stipulations for a movie being on this list? Well, obviously, if you have Batman in the title, or if I believe he played an integral role in the film, like a Batman v Superman, or Zack Snyder's Justice League, and of course, the other Justice League. I'm throwing them on this list as well. There are a couple of movies that are questionable for sure, should they be on the list or not, but I wanted to put them on because I have to get 50 movies somehow. I also did not include like the straight-to-DVD Lego Batman movies, the Scooby-Doo versus Batman, Batman Unlimited. These are films that feel like they're way more for kids than some of these other movies, and there are so many of them, I'm just like, I'll stick with the ones that I had planned to watch in the first place. Like always, man, we're gonna have some hot takes, we're gonna have some fun things to talk about. I need you guys in the comments down below letting me know what are your favorite Batman movies, animated, live action. This is a place to celebrate all of the Batman things we've gotten on the big and small screen. And if you like this sort of video, these giant rankings, and you'd love to see me do more, be sure to drop that thumbs up down below. That tells me that you'd like to see a massive DC ranking next time there's a film. I'm going to try to go quick, but you know me, I love to talk. Let's start with the movie that almost killed the Batman, Batman and Robin, a film that I actually enjoyed growing up when I was very young. This was one of those Batman movies that I watched and just had fun with, but I had no clue at the time, and I was like 9 years old, that this was the exact opposite of what Batman should be. And unlike Batman Forever, where there are some fun moments that are so ridiculously self-aware that they kind of work, right? Batman and Robin, I'm pretty sure the only person who knew the movie he was in was Arnold as Mr. Freeze. You know, throwing out one-liners, the ice, ah! Then you have Bane doing kind of the same thing, going, ah! It's just a movie that is so ridiculous on its surface. Going back and revisiting it, I can barely get through the film. People have fun with it, and I completely respect that, but most of the time it's for all the wrong reasons. This is just not Batman, nor should it be Batman. George Clooney, I'm sorry, man. It was just the movie that you were in. Austin, you gotta put Joss Whedon's Justice League this low, but some of these poor animated movies, yes. And that would not have been the case before I saw Zack Snyder's Justice League. A massive, I mean, maybe one of the biggest, most drastic improvements on a director's cut compared to the original movie that I've ever seen, right? It is incredible the difference that that movie makes going back, watching this film, and thinking to yourself, oh my God, right? There are shades of a pretty good movie in here, and you see that come to fruition in the other film. Sorry, I'm constantly making comparisons, but that's just the way that I look at this film now. It's not good in almost any way, shape, or form, other than the character moments. My biggest issue is the fact that the story is just so jumbled and messy, and it's missing all of the key parts that make it a cohesive total. So, Justice League, sorry, but you're coming in at 49. Next up is Batman and Harley Quinn. I was actually really looking forward to this because you have that classic 90s animation style. Kevin Conroy returning now, a new voice of Harley Quinn, so it is a bit different, but I had no issues with the voice cast. For this film, the reason why it's so low on this list is the fact that it was a massive disappointment because of the script. Some of the lines between Batman and Harley and the ridiculousness of this movie leaning so heavily towards kids, but then showing us adult themes in other parts of the film. The moment where they're in the Batmobile and there's farting going on, you hear the fart noises, I'm sitting back going, what am I watching? Why are you using this animation style, bringing us a movie with Kevin Conroy and giving us this as a result? Man, what a huge disappointment this was. And I struggled getting through this movie. It wasn't offensive all throughout the movie, but those specific scenes, yeah, they're bad. Next up is Batman the Killing Joke, and like Justice League, more from a disappointment standpoint as opposed to the quality moments, because there are quality moments in this movie, and those are the moments that come straight out of the comic books. You also have the classic voices, Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy, and R rating, and those things are great. But it's the other moments in this movie. It's this weird story, a romance going on here that does not fit in this movie whatsoever. And those moments that almost take away from that classic comic book story, and the fact that, you know, our two leads, even though they're iconic in their roles, they're not giving the best performances I've ever seen. So, again, you have those scenes that make it the Killing Joke, and those are the moments that I want to go back to with this movie. Everything else, I just felt like this one missed the mark in its entirety. Next up, we have Batman Solo the Dragon, and I love the concept of this, right? Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that sort of story that Batman kind of makes his way into, and I think some of the characters are interesting and intriguing. I just couldn't get on board with the story here. I found it to be a little more flat than they intended on it being, and the interactions feel maybe more stale than even the voice cast wanted it to be, because, again, I find the voice cast to be really good in this film. It is cool that Michael Jai White is in this movie, and the animation is solid for the most part. Kind of reminds me of the early 2000s, but overall, I just found this one to fall flat. This kind of stinks, because I feel like the Batman, the TV show, not the movie, is one of the more underrated things we've ever gotten from this character. It's a really fun show, it's zany, it's wacky at points, but it never really goes overboard. It brought us a great Joker, and all of those things are present. Even old SpongeBob, Tom Kenny's voice as the Penguin in this movie and in the TV show. But this movie did not really harken back to the quality that I got from the TV show. It feels disjointed. The story itself doesn't really fit the dark tone of Dracula. That's what we're here for, right? Batman versus the Dracula. And those moments for me, they were fine. And this movie as a whole is fine, but it didn't really impact me close to the level that the original show did. I love the show, by the way. Watch it. Or don't. Whatever you want to do. Then we have Batman Ninja. This is a love it or hate it type of movie, and while I don't hate it, I do find myself on the bad side of the fence. It's not that it wasn't Batman, so that automatically makes it bad. I do like the fact that they're approaching it from a completely different standpoint. This crazy, classic samurai style, both animation, action scenes, and really, you have a Batman who approaches things with a different perspective, and I like that. I appreciate that. For me, the animation was very stiff at points, even though it would become lively at other points. I think the action scenes are really well done. But there are also so many weird things in this, and I'm talking like Power Ranger Megazord crazy finale type weirdness that doesn't work as Batman. I'm thinking to myself, why make it Batman other than to get people to watch it? It was weird. I am a massive fan of Injustice, the storyline. I'm also a massive fan of what they did with Injustice in the video game world. So, knowing the comics, knowing what they were able to do in the video games, and those cutscenes are some of the best we've ever seen in the DC universe, watching this movie, there are so many missing pieces. I'm thinking, why not just make it a television series? Make it a 3-part film? They could have done so much more with what the story is. Now, the moments are there, right? Superman with the Joker. I chose this to be on the list because Batman plays an integral role, gathering everyone together to kind of take down what Superman has become. And all of those things are Injustice. I like the animation. I like the voice cast. I like a lot of things about this movie. But what I was missing is what the movie was missing. And what the movie was missing makes it, in my opinion, Injustice. So it just didn't feel like Injustice. Call it something else, maybe go a different direction, but it was way too short, and it tried to cram in so much in such a little runtime. So now we've entered what I would consider the okay tier of movies. The films before this, I would probably never go back to. They're messy. They're not as Batman as I need them to be. These films, while not great, they are definitely okay, and they gave me something to latch on to while I was watching. Superman, Batman, public enemies. Lex Luthor is president, and he puts a target on the back of Superman, and because of that, Batman. So it's a very interesting story on its surface. There was another film that we'll talk about a little bit later that I think does this concept just a bit better. This was the newer version in 2009. I like the animation style of this universe, and I like a lot about this film, but at the end of the day, even though it's one of the first ones on this list that I think is an okay movie, it didn't fully come together when you look at the concept of what's happening in this film. I think there are so many opportunities when you make Lex Luthor that big of a villainous presence, and it gets a bit ridiculous in the third act. Didn't quite come together for me, but again, I think the film is okay. Batman vs. Two-Face, Adam West and Burt Ward. Now, this one's going to hold a special place in my heart because this is the last time we'll ever see Adam West as Batman. And it's crazy he got to do that at his age. I love the fact that animation allows us to do things like that, and this world is super fun. Now, this is a part 2. Part 1 is further up this list. This story was not nearly as fun as the first, and it wasn't as cohesive, right? Over the top crazy, and the best part about this movie is William Shatner as Two-Face. Yeah, you heard me right. William Shatner as Two-Face, so that's great. His story was kind of, I was missing less Catwoman than the first movie, so overall not as good, but I still think it's a pretty fun time, and allowing these two to play these characters again is just awesome, and I love the fact that we can get that. God, I wanted to put this higher. I had it higher, and then I went back and I rewatched it, and I said, no, it's not good. It's not good. There's so many things about this movie that they just don't work. Nicole Kidman's Chase Meridian, the conversations she has with Batman and Bruce Wayne are so awkward and cringeworthy, and they just don't work. Two-Face. This is not Two-Face. This is Tommy Lee Jones playing, like, overly eccentric, almost Joker Two-Face. Now, Riddler, I guess that fits more of the character, and honestly, Jim Carrey is amazing in this movie. He's absolutely spectacular. There's so many things about this film, like Riddler's plan, the fact that there's a scene, the origins of Robin, where Bruce Wayne literally swings in, beats up criminals. Everyone sees that it's Bruce Wayne. Nobody says anything. I didn't realize Gotham was almost fully CGI as a kid in this movie. Like that opening shot of Gotham, I'm like, whoa, it's a video game. It's ridiculous and stupid. I kind of embrace that stupidity, and I'm not giving it a good score, but I'm putting it more on this tier because I do kind of have fun with it, with the lunacy of it all, the over-exaggerated elements of this movie, and Jim Carrey's Riddler. It was a different film. Bring Jim Carrey back now and let him play this role, which they will not, but I think he'd crush it. Batman, Mystery of the Batwoman. We are back in our universe that I know and love, the 90s Batman universe. We have Robin. We have a different version of Batgirl, but now we have Batwoman. Who is Batwoman? Is it the daughter of a crime boss? Is it someone that recently joined the police force? There are so many culprits at play here. And one thing I'll give to this movie is that I did not figure out who it was until we got that reveal. Now, the reveal is kind of cheating when it comes to revealing who Batwoman was. I'm like, oh, well, I guess I should have seen that coming. But there's some nice chemistry. Some really questionable things in this movie, like the way that Bruce Wayne acts towards certain people. Maybe that's in the animated show, right? But I just don't remember it going back and watching this movie. But overall, I think there are some fun elements to this movie, seeing Batwoman in action on the little bat plane thing that she has, and some fun moments with a villain like Penguin in this film from that classic TV show. I just love this universe, so pulls on that nostalgic bone for me. Is there a nostalgic bone? I don't know. There's going to be some people mad at me for this one. I know it's low. This is the 1960s Batman movie, not the TV show. Now, this television show, it's classic for a reason, right? It embraced the quirky elements of Batman that we don't often see anymore. But going back and revisiting something like this is fun because it's so drastically different from anything that we know. And while Schumacher attempted to recreate this cheese, so in that way, I look at Schumacher's movies and say, that's what they're going for, right? Just doing it in a more 90s, but modern at the time sort of way. This film is just as intensely Batman from its time as anything was any character. It took all of the quirky elements, and really seeing a billionaire and a young boy dressed in a bat suit and go around and, fighting crime, it does seem silly on its surface, and this embraces that. Now, the movie itself, there's so many dumb moments, but there's so many dumb, memorable moments, right? What is Batman going to do with the bomb? Like, that's what this show was able to bring us in the 60s. That's what this movie brings us. I feel like it maybe works even better in an animated world, which is why I have one movie a little bit higher than this one. But in live action, for the time, I can understand why people loved it and embraced it. Oh, boy. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Leave me alone. Please. It's Batman Returns. And I think this rewatch actually did a bit for it, right? I had it lower. I had it below Batman Forever. That's always kind of been my mindset. A lot of it's nostalgia-based, absolutely. But as a kid, I just didn't like this movie growing up at all. And going back and watching it, I can see the themes, and I can see what Tim Burton was going for in this film. A much more exotic type of movie, a much more Tim Burton movie than the first. But it's so drastically different than the first movie. The thing that works so well in this movie is Penguin and his mentality Catwoman, well, just Catwoman. She's amazing. She steals the entire movie. And when they all come together, especially that moment when Penguin meets Catwoman, who meets Batman, that was really cool to see. And their perspectives on Gotham and just their presence overall in Gotham is really fascinating. But this movie also starts that ridiculousness that we get in Batman Forever, but it's so drastically different from the tone of the rest of the film, which is dark. And Penguin's backstory is really dark and really gritty. And Penguin's plan here, strapping the things to the actual penguins, and what can someone explain to me what is that? And I know I'm in the minority here, I know this movie is beloved, but seeing penguins run for mayor and, the fact that he just bites someone's nose and there are never any repercussions, everybody's like, oh, he just bit someone's nose. Well, also, Batman straight up kills a man in this movie. The dude explodes, and he smiles. I'm like, no one ever talks about... I forgot. I didn't remember that. But nobody ever talks about that when they complain about the new movies. I'm thinking to myself, dude, he literally just straight up murdered a dude. The best thing about this movie, honestly, is the shot composition, production design, and cinematography, right? The framing for our characters is incredible. I like this version of Gotham better in the first movie because it was more grand and we could see more happening and it was less claustrophobic, even though I think that's what Burton's going for in this film. But for me, it's the story overall. When Catwoman's on screen, you're hooked. But when she's not on screen, it just didn't work quite as well for me. I understand why people love this movie, but I don't love it. And I don't think I ever will, unfortunately. Batman Gotham Knight is really cool because it's an anthology of sorts. It chronicles Bruce Wayne's turn into Batman, but each story that we get to see, there's a different animation style, there's a different look and feel to each of them, even though it's telling essentially the same story. That's really cool. For me, my big issue with this film is the fact that it feels so incohesive and almost jumbled that it doesn't come together in the way that the filmmakers intend. This is one that I appreciate much more than I actually enjoyed, because when I first watched it way back when it came out, like 2009, 2010, I didn't really like it at all. But now I can look back at the different art styles and just kind of what they were going for and appreciate it much more, which is why I raised it just a little bit. Still not great, but I think it's okay for what it was going for. Just like Justice League, we have two versions of this movie on this list. And the first one that we're talking about is the normal cut of Batman v Superman, which I know it's unpopular, I still think it's okay. And I actually kind of enjoyed watching this movie, even though the immense level of disappointment I felt leaving the theater, that could probably never be topped again, because this was one of my most anticipated movies of all time. And I walked out of the movie, I was so angry because it wasn't what I needed it to be, but looking back on it, I'm like, I guess it's still okay, right? The way that obviously Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman are handled is fantastic. Superman's storyline, he gets the short end of the stick in this version, for sure. And I'm just not a big fan of Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and some of the moments that happen with that character. Also, the battle is a little bit rushed, especially this movie specifically. It's really rushed, and that storyline doesn't quite come together. But Snyder still brings us moments in this movie that are touching, they're incredible. The symbolism in this film is absolutely there, and you can feel the passion behind it. Never quite got there for me, but I think this version is an okay movie, but that's different when you look at it from a disappointment perspective, because it was really disappointing. Son of Batman. First of all, I really like Jason O'Mara's Batman. I really do. His voice fits the character. He has that ominous nature to him, but learning that he has a son in Damian Wayne really throws a curveball into everything he's trying to accomplish in Gotham. This is after he's had his other Robins. So Damian Wayne comes in, everything is messed up. There's a heavy play and influence by the League of Assassins in this movie, and this was a fun film. Now, where the story goes, the inclusion of Deathstroke, which I was a little bit disappointed with because he wasn't as Deathstrokey, even though his voice was great, as he needed to be. And the final battle in the third act was a little anticlimactic, but I still think this one is fun enough. Bruce Wayne discovering he has this son. How am I going to approach this? There's a lot there to make it a fun watch and to start a pretty good trilogy. Matt Ryan is Constantine, Swamp Thing, Justice League Dark, but Batman plays a pretty big role in this movie, kind of the assembling of this team if you will. And I chose to include this because Jason O'Mara, once again, playing the character, crushes this role. Now, I know a lot of people that love this movie. I'm not quite there on it because I found it to be a bit more dull than the source material. The source material is great, and hearing Matt Ryan voice this character is everything I need as a fan of this character. But I felt the story didn't quite come together in the way that it should have. The third act is exciting. The second act, though, is kind of getting a little, I was nodding off just a little bit. Came back together. Batman's inclusion is great, and it's detrimental for the formation of this team. But overall, I didn't love this movie maybe as much as others. A Victorian-age Gotham City. Bruce Greenwood as Batman. Bruce Greenwood is amazing as Batman. We've heard him countless times. He's good here. And Jack the Ripper being the villainous presence in this movie. Now, that's not all, right? We have our Catwomans. We have our classic Batman characters reformatted and put in this time period and given to us in a way that we've really never seen before. So seeing this time period, seeing all of those things. Now, the story of everyone discovering what the Batman is, his presence in Gotham, really Bruce Wayne's role, is not as intriguing as actually seeing Batman in the suit run around and do things very differently than he would in today's time, right? That's super fun. And solving this mystery is also fun. But there's a lot of downtime in this film that I wasn't quite enjoying as much as I needed to. And there are also some characters that just didn't need to be included at all. The animation could have been just a bit better. Overall, I love what they did here. It's different. It's what DC animation is known for, bringing us things that we've never seen before. Didn't love it, but I thought it was okay. Jason O'Mara, once again, Selena Kyle's influence on this movie, the role of Catwoman in Batman Hush, is awesome. Then, of course, the character of Hush himself, I was really looking forward to this coming out back in 2019. This was one of my most anticipated movies. Now, knowing the story, kind of who Hush is in the comics, and then who he was in this movie, it was a bit disjointed. It wasn't quite what I knew. Now, maybe that's my fault because I'm so familiar with that story and that character, but I didn't quite get out of this film what I wanted to as a fan of Hush, as a fan of that Selena Kyle-Batman relationship. Now, it's rock solid, and the action scenes, especially kind of that final fight in this movie where everything comes together, I thoroughly enjoyed. But overall, Batman Hush is one of the bigger DC animated disappointments for me personally, because I expected so much, like a really big expectation going into this film. I didn't get as much as I needed. Now we've reached the movies that I consider good films. These are films I would go back to, and we're going to start with the third film in that Damian Wayne Robin trilogy, Batman Bad Blood, where Batman has gone missing, and it's up to our crew of newish characters, then of course Nightwing and Robin and Batwoman, all of these people to come together, figure things out, but let Gotham know that Batman is still present at the same time. And while that story is super fun, there's a background story that I'm not as interested in this movie, and it doesn't quite live up to the previous film in the franchise, which we'll talk about, but there's a lot of fun to be had, and I really love the animation style in this specific trilogy. And again, you can't go wrong as Jason O'Mara as Batman. He's incredible. Let's go back to 2016, Adam West, Burt Ward, the first brand new movie in that 1960s world, Batman, Return of the Caped Crusaders. And this is the one for me that just works so well, even better than the 1960s live-action movie. All their zany, wacky things work so well in this animated world, and I just really like this story, bringing back all of the villains. That relationship with Julie Newmar's Catwoman, hearing her voice that character, it's just really cool to see, and this was the one for me where I said they could do so much with this world. Now, they only brought us 2 films, and obviously we had, the passing away of very iconic figures, and it's sad to think about, but it was so nice that we still got these 2 films. But this one is definitely the better out of the 2. Better story, better zingers by Robin. Robin and his zingers. That's nice. This is Batman Beyond the movie. And I wasn't going to include this, but I was at 49. I said, I need 50. And the reason why is because this is only 46 minutes, and essentially, it's just the first 2 episodes of the show. But it's packaged together, called Batman Beyond the movie. It's even on IMDb as that. So I said, you know what, let's include it because it is technically Batman. It's kind of the fall of Bruce Wayne as Batman. He's too old to do anything now, but Terry McGinnis comes in and discovers he is Batman, thus puts on the suit, and I really want to see this in live action. I mean, really, really bad. This is such a cool story. I've always said Michael Keaton would play an amazing version of this Bruce Wayne. Maybe we'll see a little bit of that in the Batwoman movie, but I just love the story. I love the origins. This world is so crazy. This future that they've built is so different, and even the intro of this show, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. Is it a great movie? Not necessarily. It really does feel like 2 TV episodes, but I really like the 2 TV episodes, so it's good for me. Batman Year One. Ben McKenzie plays Bruce Wayne and Batman. Commissioner Gordon is actually played by Bryan Cranston in this film, and most of the movie is told from his perspective. You get a huge voiceover from Gordon, and the way that they treat his character here is so different from anything I've ever seen with Commissioner Gordon, right? It is your classic Batman Year One storyline, but they handle it, I think, even in a more mature way in this movie than maybe they even do in the comics. This is not one for kids, by the way. This is one that gets a little bit deeper than we're used to seeing. My big flaw, though, with this film, I don't think Ben McKenzie is a very good Bruce Wayne. He sounded pretty good as Batman, but Ben McKenzie as Bruce Wayne, it was flat. And that side of the story was a bit flat. This is really more of a Commissioner Gordon movie. Now, it's still Batman Year One. It's on this list, whatever. But I'm not entirely sure if it served Batman's role as well as it intended to. Bryan Cranston, though, I'd be okay with seeing him in live action as Gordon. In the 1950s, the Justice League, they're formed, and they create a new frontier. Now, this is a movie that showcases everyone. You have that classic Wonder Woman. You have a version of Superman that I think a lot of us know from the comic books. It feels like classic Superman. And even Green Lantern's story is great. I'm putting it on this list because I really enjoyed Batman's story. The way that Gotham looks at Batman in the 1950s is so drastically different than anything we've ever seen. And it feels so comic book accurate. It feels so special. Now, when it all tries to come together, the story itself starts to get a bit jumbled, and we never fully see the Justice League come together like we hoped it would at the end of this movie after a brilliant setup for so many of these characters. But this is a cool concept. It's a good film. And I think when we're focusing on Batman in this movie, there are some of the more interesting Batman scenes that I've ever seen in a pre-2000s setting, which is why I put it on this list. And the animation style is beautiful. So maybe I'm even too low on this film because I really did enjoy it, and it's one that is super fun. Was this going to be any lower on this list? I mean, how? It's Batman and the Ninja Turtles, right? Ray Shankle, the League of Assassins, Troy Baker plays Batman. He's really good in the role, by the way. But then that combines with the Teenage Mutant Ninja freaking Turtles and Shredder and gang. Man, this one was fun. This one was fun. Batman literally says pizza time in this movie, right? It's a Marvel DC crossover. Not really. But they combine all the things that makes the Turtles special with the darkness of Batman. And there are some dark moments with the Turtles as well. I think it's a scene where Leonardo sees his brothers dying, and Raphael is a darker character. So obviously there's going to be a little relationship there with Batman. So I was very fearful of this film. I thought it was going to be completely ridiculous. But doing all of those things that I just mentioned, plus successfully including Batgirl and Robin, yeah, this is fun, man. If you missed this and you're a fan of these characters, came out in 2019, seek it out, watch it immediately. Justice League War, this is a very different world than what we're used to in this animated sphere, right? Because Superman is so new. He's almost an enigma in this new universe that they've created for the Justice League. And since then, with Apocalypse War, that universe is kind of out of the way. We're starting something even newer than that. I love what they're doing with this, by the way, almost including Flashpoint as that way to restart these universes. But this was the beginning of this one. I like bringing in Shazam here, a very different version of Green Lantern. Some of those relationships are really good. More serious version of Flash. But it all starts with Batman, right? That's why I put this movie on the list. It's Batman. It's his fear of this new character known as Superman. It is Darkseid, an alien armada from Apocalypse. They attack, and it gets a little more intense the further we go in this series. But in this movie, he poses a threat almost immediately. So they've started out with one of the biggest threats they'll ever face, and that is Darkseid. It was great to see. Super fun action scenes. The whole world's in peril. The Justice League has to come together. Justice League War, kind of led by Batman, is a really good movie. I don't want to say a lot about this film because there's so much to kind of spoil with the reveal in this movie. It's Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker. The actual Batman Beyond movie, having an affinity for this show, may just be the reason why I enjoy it so much. But man, this is so much fun. There is a really emotional storyline in this movie that comes to fruition in the third act, and a lot of it is what Kevin Conroy's Bruce Wayne is dealing with, but now the new Batman, Batman Beyond, has to deal with the repercussions of that. Joker has returned. How? Who? What? Why? This doesn't make sense. Well, it all comes together, and I found this to be a really enjoyable movie. Again, go watch Batman Beyond. You don't have to, but you should. We're going back to the Jason O'Mara trilogy, the second film, and that is Batman versus Robin. Now, in the first film, we had the League of Assassins. In the third film, Batman disappears. But in this movie, it's the Court of Owls. And the Court of Owls is a group of villains that I want to see in the live-action world. I would love to see these villains, this villain specifically, in the Batman franchise. Does that make sense? They are so good in this movie, and kind of the secrets that are being held, the fact that they're trying to recruit Bruce Wayne, but at the same time, Batman's dealing with this because they're trying to get Robin to join their ranks. At least one person is, and he's considering it because his very strained relationship with his father, and thus we get Batman versus Robin. Now, is it truly a movie that lives up to the name? Not necessarily, but the underlying story with the Court of Owls is fascinating. I really enjoyed this film. It's the best in the trilogy, in my opinion, and it provided some great moments with Robin. 2014, Batman Assault on Arkham, including the Suicide Squad in the Batman Arkham universe from the video game. So this was cool, just like starting out, oh, okay, well, I'm definitely going to like this because it's in the Arkhamverse, and the fight style, the animation is incredible. The characters, we get looks at someone like Harley Quinn, Deadshot, the Riddler's in here, the Joker's in here, pretty much everyone you see on that photo there. I loved this idea. Now, the movie, the execution, it may not have been as exciting as I needed it to be honest, and I couldn't look back on it and say, well, that was a great film and, you know, the best out of the Arkham universe. No, I think the games are more fun than this movie, but it was still really fun, really cool, and it's a version of these characters that I want to revisit again and again. First of all, I couldn't even believe this was on Letterboxd. It doesn't even have the little profile picture there, but it is the ultimate edition of Batman vs. Superman. Everything I feel about the original movie kind of sticks, except for the fact that we get way more story for Superman here. There are various scenes throughout the third act that tie certain things in that I had a massive issue with in the first movie. Now, the things that I don't like, they're still in the movie, right? Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, I don't love his presence. There are certain things about that third act that stay, and they're here, and I have an issue with them. But overall, when you add this much story for Superman, and it gives us almost a new perspective on his role in the film, plus one or two more Batman scenes that I think, you know, almost perfect Bruce's arc even more so in this movie, it makes it a better film. Now, because those bad elements are there, I can't go much higher with my score, but it's a significantly better product, and this is the movie I think people should see when they see this movie. Is it long? Yes. Does it matter? No. Batman Superman Apocalypse. This is, I believe, a year after Public Enemies, and I didn't like Public Enemies as much, but this one's super cool. Because Supergirl comes into town, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what's her role? And this really is a movie about Supergirl, but obviously Batman plays a huge role. Darkseid is after Supergirl, and because of that, Batman and Superman have to fight Darkseid, and man, he is ruthless in this movie. Absolutely ruthless. But to see the interactions between them and Supergirl and bringing in characters like a Wonder Woman, and it is really just one of those classic DC stories with great animation. The battle with Darkseid on the farm is one of the coolest battles I've ever seen in the animated universe, and this movie specifically is a super fun one. If you're going to see one out of the two, skip Public Enemies, watch this one, but I think watching them both would serve more for the characters. Tim Daly, Kevin Conroy, Clancy Brown, Mark Hamill, the definitive voices for these definitive roles that I grew up with. This movie came out in 1997. This is one of the first ever animated anythings I ever saw for Batman and Superman. And ever since watching this movie, I wanted to see them come together in live action. So this is a very important movie for me. It's the Batman-Superman movie, world's finest. Now, this is one that I didn't have a chance to go back and revisit because I've seen it 15, 20 times. I wanted to get the new things out of the way. So maybe I like it even more upon revisiting it. But I hold so many special memories with this movie, and to see all of these interactions for the first time, and everyone's so good as these characters, it makes the movie better. Right, the story, it's it's cliche, it's generic, Lex Luthor's coming after Superman, Batman gets in the picture, all these things. But it's like an iconic movie because of so many iconic interactions, and I just love it, man. This is one of the definitive Batman Superman meetings. Seek it out, watch it. Batman, The Long Halloween Part 1. Jensen Ackles plays Batman following a brutal series of murders throughout Gotham. Batman has to attempt to solve this crime, very similar to what we saw in the live action The Batman that just came out in theaters this weekend. So it's a very integral story. I really love this story from the comics. I didn't quite love the execution in this specific movie. Part 2 for me does bring it all together. It is more exciting. I was more on board with the character motivations. There are certain things about this film that don't fully capture what they were able to do in the comics with this story, so I didn't quite love it. And out of the two, it is the one that I don't feel like I need to go and revisit. One, because I know the story so well, but two, because the pacing does sort of throw me off. The story's definitely there, and Batman does experience failure, I think, on a level that we've never really seen him experience before in an animated world. So that's cool. The voice cast is great. This movie as a whole is worth watching, especially to get to part 2. The Tower of Babel story from the comics is a classic story where Batman, and we've seen him do this 1,000 times, but Batman actually has to utilize the fact that he knows all of the weaknesses of the heroes and take advantage of those weaknesses. So even though it says Justice League Doom, it is a Batman story at his core, and he has to essentially take down the Justice League. Why does he do it? Well, watch the movie. It'll explain it, but this one, I think I love this more than a lot of people because you finally get to see Batman bring to life the knowledge that he's had stored away, but do it for different purposes than maybe what you expect with our heroes going up against him. So, really cool story. This animation style specifically, I know it came out in 2012, but you do have Tim Daly and Kevin Conroy, kind of bringing their voices to a new look and feel. And it's one of the coolest stories I've ever seen from Batman and from the Justice League in the animated world. This is the first movie on this list that I can truly say, I think, is a great movie. And like I said, we've entered that tier of great films, the one that I would recommend to absolutely anyone that's a fan of Batman and Friends. Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, a good version of Lex Luthor comes over to our world and says, hey, we need you guys to come help save our universe. Now, the reason that I put it on this Batman list is because Batman's story is fascinating, and we have this alternate version of Batman, Owlman. Oh my God. James Woods voiced Owlman, and William Baldwin was Batman. This is different. This is really different. Came out in 2010. The animation style kind of harkens back more to what we know from the early 2000s, not fully embracing that. But I love this story because all of these alternate versions of our characters, each motivation is different, whether it be Sinister or bringing the Sinister ones and seeing that they're actually the good guys in our universe. It's the interactions. It's that final battle between Batman and Owlman, which is still one of my favorite animated Batman battles. I love this film. I think it's truly great, very unique. Batman and Mr. Freeze, Sub-Zero. This is the definitive Mr. Freeze story. I don't ever want anybody watching Batman and Robin and saying, oh, that's Mr. Freeze? That's not Mr. Freeze. This is Mr. Freeze. This is the version that I've always wanted to see translated to the big screen. Now, it's fine if we don't get this version because we'll always have this movie, but everything that happens with his wife here, his motivations, his character arc, it's beautiful. It is less so a Batman movie and more so a Mr. Freeze movie, but I'm okay with that. And it's not quite as cinematic as Mask of the Phantasm, and I don't even know if this one came out in the theaters, but it still fits firmly in that world. I think it's a great movie, a great origin story, and a great kind of villainous presence from a villain that always gets the short end of the stick. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. I could have actually put the Lego movie on this list because Batman's kind of, sort of, maybe in that, not really. I'm glad I didn't do it, but the Lego Batman. This is clearly a Batman movie. I said I wasn't doing the Lego movies. I wasn't doing the straight-to-DVD Lego movies. This one made a splash. It did reasonably well at the box office, but Will Arnett is a definitive voice of Batman, in my opinion. Now, I don't know if we'll ever see more of this universe because I think the rights got bought out, whatever, but this is such a unique spin on the character. And actually, while Zach Galifianakis wasn't the best Joker voice I've ever heard, his Joker character and some of his expressions in this movie are actually quite great, and it's that relationship between Joker and Batman that's explored in a way that we've never seen before. His relationship with Michael Cera's Robin is amazing, and the quirks, and the charm, and the references to other Batman movies, plus making fun of Batman-isms in a way that we've never seen before, even different from the 1960s Batman movie. It's so self-aware, it's so wonderful, it's so fun, and I think the Lego Batman movie truly is a great movie. Harvey and the Falcons, Bruce Wayne's journey, Batman's journey in The Long Halloween Part 2, the turn of Harvey Dent into Two-Face, man. This is such a beautiful film for so many reasons. Again, Batman just came off of experiencing failure, an immense level of failure, and now he has to bring it all together and help solve this crime and help solve new crimes that are coming out around the city. I really love the way that this one specifically played out. The Long Halloween has always been that storyline for Batman, and it started off pretty good, but the way that it ends in this movie and just delivering an animated film that, unlike The Killing Joke, takes advantage of all of the positives that the original comic was able to give us, but putting their own spin on it. And I didn't give him the kudos last time, but Josh Duhamel as Harvey Dent in this movie. We know him from the Transformers movies and the fun little action flicks, the rom-coms. Josh Duhamel is amazing as Harvey Dent, and I wouldn't mind him to play Harvey Dent in the live-action movies as well. I really like the way they executed The Long Halloween Part 2, and it brought it all together in such a satisfying way. This is a really satisfying movie that came out just last year. Hold on. Michael B. Jordan played Cyborg in this movie? Are you kidding me? Kevin McKidd plays Thomas Wayne in this Flashpoint film. Kevin Conroy is Bruce Wayne. But Justin Chambers, as the Flash, of course, does his classic, gonna save my mom, it's gonna go well. No, it doesn't really go well. He changes everything. Wonder Woman is fighting Aquaman. And even though Bruce Wayne himself doesn't play a big role, we are talking about just Batman. So that could mean anybody here. Thomas Wayne is Batman in this other universe. And Thomas Wayne's role in Barry's storyline in this movie is awesome. He's dark, he's brutal, he uses guns, he doesn't care because he lost his son in this other universe. I said I wasn't going to spoil things. It came out in 2013. What do you want me to do? But yeah, I had to put it on this list because the role that Batman plays in Flashpoint is massive, and we're going to see that translate in this new movie because we're having two Batmans in the film. So that will inevitably make this list, hopefully, when we get that film. But as of right now, this is easily one of the best DC animated movies. I love what it does for Barry. I love what it does for Batman. That moment at the end when he reads that note is absolutely beautiful, and the animation is some of the best we've ever seen in the DC animated space. And yeah, number 10. Look, I know a lot of people look down on this movie, maybe more so than they used to, and I actually know a lot of people that love Batman Returns way more than this film. That's okay. I just love the feel of the world a bit more in this movie. I love the fact that Tim Burton isn't going full Burton, just enough to create this crazy Gotham City and this sporadic landscape. Jack Nicholson's Joker is incredible. It isn't fair that I always make those Heath Ledger comparisons. I shouldn't do that. That's on me. Because watching his performance and seeing how it carries this entire movie is wonderful to see. Now, don't get me wrong. Michael Keaton as Batman's really good in this movie. This is the best he's ever been as the character. I love the introduction. I love everything about it. It has this, gothic feel to it that hasn't quite been replicated in any of the other movies. And the craziness of that third act, man. And I still remember Joker falling and seeing that look on his face when he's smashing the ground. I'm like, God, he's so good as Joker, even when he's dead. Spoilers. 55-year-old Bruce Wayne, voiced by Peter Weller, has to get back into the mask, don the cape once more, and become the Batman again in The Dark Knight Returns Part 1. This world, man. This world is amazing. This is what I wanted from that live-action interaction between Batman and Superman. Now, that's unfair, because this novel will never be able to be replicated fully and done justice. But if it's ever going to happen, these are the movies, Part 1 specifically, which I just believe is a brilliant interpretation of this character. Now, there are things that come around in Part 2 that I think are just a bit more exciting, are just a bit crazier, but to see Batman come back, fight this huge gang that's ravaging the city, and do it justice, right? He's 55, but he can still kick some butt and I love to see it, man. This is such a fun movie to go back and watch, and if you've never seen these two films specifically, Part 1 and Part 2, out of anyone on this list, this may be the one to go see. So I'll be honest here. This one I gave a bit of a higher score than some movies that are above it, but my reasoning for putting it just a tad bit lower is because this is a Batman list. And even though I love this movie, I think the movies above it do a bit more justice to the character of Batman, but that is not a slight on Zack Snyder's Justice League. Every bit of improvement I talked about between Batman vs. Superman and then the Ultimate Edition is absolutely the case within Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. But think about that, multiply it by 10. It's a drastic improvement. It's a different movie. It's a different movie with a different storyline that fleshes out each individual character, and I think does Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne's arc so much better than the first movie did it. I didn't understand his mentality, like going full rage in the last movie and then just doing a complete 180 in Justice League. This movie gives us way more reasoning behind the why of it all, and does what they did for Superman's arc in Dawn of Justice for Batman in Justice League. This is the story that he meant to tell. Now, the movie as a whole, I really do love. The moment with Flash, the third act, the implications of Darkseid, all of those things are handled super well, but just looking at it as a Batman story, it is so much better. It's firmly in the top 10. It's probably above this on a non-Batman list, but just on a Batman list, I am putting it in between Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and Part 2. Austin, why did you decide to split up Part 1 and Part 2? Well, I struggled so bad trying to figure out where I should put Part 2 and where I should put Red Hood. So I went Red Hood slightly below Part 2 because Part 2 is just so epic, but Red Hood is easily, and I mean easily, one of the best Batman stories we've ever seen. Again, Bruce Greenwood as this character is phenomenal, but it all starts out with what happened to Jason Todd. And what happened is Joker beat him to death with a crowbar. It's not good. Batman's here, Nightwing's here, but Red Hood has arrived in Gotham. Everyone's trying to figure out who Red Hood is, but it's this underlying story, the fact that Jason Todd is the one that has returned, and his rage towards Batman, but also his rage towards the Joker. That's where it really spawns from. He's looking at Batman at the end there saying, why didn't you kill him? Why do you just keep this guy around? A question that the audience has been asking for years, but it's a reasonable question posing some great moral quandaries. And I just love what this movie's able to do, not only for the character of Batman, but for Red Hood and for Joker and John DiMaggio as this character, as Joker. I want to hear more John DiMaggio as Joker. He's awesome in this role. Really awesome. Dark Knight Returns Part 2, oh my god, this movie's crazy. So Batman defeats the mutants from the first movie, and not only do we get the return of the Joker, because he realizes, oh, my best friend has returned from the grave. So he has a purpose again. But the government sends Superman after Batman to stop him. Thus, Batman dons his suit. Man, what a crazy, crazy movie this second part is. And part of the reason why I put it above the Red Hood is because it's so epic, but at the same time, it's this very personal story with Bruce Wayne. It's this very personal story between Bruce Wayne and Superman. What happens to Superman in this movie is, I've never seen anything like that before in my life. Now, a little bit in Superman Red Son, a very similar-esque storyline, but that battle between Batman and Superman, and then, of course, what happens between he and the Joker, it's a monumental story, and one that would be so hard to replicate in live action, but it works so beautifully in the animated world.
Oh, I'm so tired. It's such a long list. Oh my god, my voice, help!
The Dark Knight Rises. I understand people have flaws with this film, and I'm not going to sit back and say the third act is perfectly constructed. Should they have all died from nuclear fallout? Maybe. Just maybe. But what this does for the character of Bruce Wayne, the way that all of this culminates, the epic nature of this movie, the way that I resonate with the character of Bane, not like an emotional way, but just his presence on screen, played by Tom Hardy. And this is a very personal story with Bruce Wayne. When he's in the pit, right, and he can't figure his way out, he has to come to terms with the person that he really is and realize that it's less about him and more about
everything surrounding him, the people of Gotham, which he's always claimed to fight for, but in this movie, I see it more so than I saw in any other film in the trilogy. And learning what he had to learn, coming out of the pit, it's the dawn of a new Batman. And then we finally get that epic battle. I've talked about this movie countless times, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. I understand logical fallacies, all of those things. I've heard the complaints. I'll continue to hear the complaints. And so this is, I guess, much more of a personal choice. The Dark Knight trilogy resonates with me so much. So I see the complaints. I disagree with some of them. And then other ones, I don't look at as hard because of the great moments, the epic moments, the unreal. I love this movie. It's hard for me to look down on it, and I think it keeps that quality with the rest of the trilogy. Just not as good. Andrea Beaumont is one of those characters. I would love to see her, the Phantasm, this version of Joker. We know what Mark Hamill can do, but oh my God, this is terrifying. I'd love to see all of those things translate to live action, but if we never get to see it, this is one of the best Batman movies ever. This is, in my opinion, a Batman movie that will always be looked at, and people will say, is that one of the best Bruce Wayne arcs we've ever seen? Like, it's good that we get a lot from Batman, some great action scenes, Batman doing Batman things, right? But in terms of what Bruce Wayne is having to deal with in this movie, it's heartbreaking, it's tragic, it's amazing. It is everything I never knew I wanted to see, and it feels so cinematic. It's the Batman from the animated series. But it's such a cinematic feeling movie, and it's the best use of that score and that animation that we've ever seen. I love this movie. I think it's expertly written. I think it's a phenomenal film, one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. I kid you not. The only thing I don't like about Batman Begins, that I truly don't like, is the performance from Katie Holmes. It doesn't feel great, and I think Christopher Nolan agreed, because, of course, she was recast in the next film. That's not a slight on Katie Holmes. I think she's a good actor. I just don't think she fit the part, if you know what I mean. Everything else is really great. Now, watching this movie as a kid back in 2005, I was 10 years old, right? So it kind of scared me. And I'm thinking to myself, Batman's not supposed to be scary. It's supposed to be Batman and Robin. What are we doing here? And then I realized who the character was. And the more I read the comics, I 5 years later turned 15 and said, that's Batman. That's who Batman's supposed to be. And the fact that Nolan could capture that, keep it grounded, keep it intense, and bring us some great villainous characters like a Scarecrow and like Liam Neeson playing Ra's al Ghul. It's awesome, man. It really is awesome. It's such a fun movie to revisit, and the chaos that happens in that third act when the city explodes, the gas is going rampant throughout, and Batman has to become the hero that we know and love in The Dark Knight, in The Dark Knight Rises. I love this movie. It's a great origin. It's a great beginning and the start of one of the best trilogies ever. Is it too early for me to say that The Batman is my favorite Batman origin story that we've ever seen on the big screen? Is it too early to say that? It's not my favorite Batman origin story ever. There are a couple of comic book runs that I'm still probably a bigger fan of, but on the big screen, to put it above Batman Begins is a tough call because I've seen that movie countless times, because I've been in love with that trilogy for so long. But this is the Batman movie that I never knew I needed. This is the Batman movie that takes a look at the character from a very artistic and just drastically different perspective, puts a bit of a new spin on it, but goes back to his gothic and noir detective mystery roots. And yes, it takes elements from Seven. I talked about that in my spoiler review. Okay, that's fine, right? But it does enough new and enough different to provide us a new great character to latch on to. And the argument against, well, he's not a very good Bruce Wayne, he's not Bruce Wayne yet. It's year two, right? The Nolan trilogy kind of rushed that. I'm okay with it, but kind of rushed into that playboy persona that we know Bruce Wayne to be. I think at the end of this film, and I'm not going to dive into spoilers here, he embraces who he needs to be, kind of more of a beacon of hope, less vengeance, right? And eventually, I think in the next film, we will see more of that version of Bruce Wayne, less of the emo kind of sad Bruce Wayne. So those are the complaints. I understand the complaints to a degree, but at the same time, I just love what we get from Batman in this movie. Absolutely love it. It's awesome. It's fun. The score is amazing. The Batmobile, that scene rocked my socks off. The villains are amazing. Riddler is spectacular. What we're going to see from Penguin, I believe he could go down as one of the better villains we've ever seen. And Catwoman. I love this movie. I've seen it 3 times. I love it the more I see it. It's awesome.
But is it as good as The Dark Knight?
The Dark Knight is one of my favorite movies ever made, so it's hard to match up to those standards. And sure, you could say this movie works not solely, but it works mostly because of, well, Joker. Heath Ledger as the character. He's amazing. He's phenomenal. We know this. People said it 1,000 times. I don't need to repeat it. But I do want to take... Oh, it's thundering outside. It's thundering. It's spooky. I got to give Bruce Wayne his kudos. I have to give a little bit to Christian Bale here for carrying that side of the film. You know, the moment when he goes to the press conference, Harvey's speaking, and he's going to tell everyone he's Batman. He's willing to give it all up for Gotham. And then when he experiences the emotional fallout from what happened to Rachel, we see both sides of that coin. That's a Two-Face reference. That's a pun. But we see how Harvey handles it. We see how Bruce handles it. Bruce experiences emotion, but Harvey lets the anger get the best of him. And that's why Bruce's story in this movie is often overlooked, because we give so much kudos to the Joker and what Heath Ledger did. And what he did is phenomenal. It's top tier. It's top notch. It probably will never be topped. I don't know. But I think all sides of this movie are great. Is the third act maybe not as intense and phenomenal as the first 2 acts? Sure, but I say that about the Batman, say that about a lot of movies. This movie's amazing. It's going to be hard to top it. I don't think the Batman will ever get there for me, no matter how many times I see it, but you never know, guys. But Nolan right now, he's the top dog in my book. Oh my God.
Hang on. There we go. I've been talking for an hour and 30 minutes, and now I gotta edit this video, so I ain't gonna lie to you. My voice is gone.
It was a big one. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being here. I want to say thank you for supporting this video, this channel. You know, whether it's dropping a thumbs up, leaving a comment, all of those things, man, it tells me you want to see more things like this. If this video does well, if you guys tell me you enjoyed it, I'll do a big old DC ranking when the next DC movie comes out. All the movies ever, because that's my plan. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it big time. I'll see you soon.